โมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะพุทธังธัมมังสังฆังนะมัสสามิ Blessings, good evening to all. A recurring obstacle for people aiming to practice Buddhism, put the Buddhist teachings into practice, whether it's meditation or precepts or practice of compassion, whatever aspect it is, or the higher philosophies, teaching on causality and so on. One of the biggest problems is doubt. And many people, they come to the Buddhist teachings and they find that the teachings make some good sense, but they're not yet willing to commit maybe to calling themselves a Buddhist or practicing on a regular basis. They like to dabble or try a bit of meditation occasionally, read a Buddhist book, take on some Buddhist ideas sometimes, but they're not yet really committed. And part of that is just they still have doubts about themselves, about the whole thing. That's quite understandable. If you're new to Buddhism, then you will have doubts because there's a lot to absorb quickly. You can't absorb necessarily all the teachings and understand everything that the Buddha said and taught straight away. But you notice as you keep practicing, if you say you keep practicing meditation, listening to Dhamma, reading Buddhist books and so on, if you keep doing the practice, then little by little you gain more experience at it, like anything in life. If you take up a new hobby or a new skill, well, it will take you a while before you become adept, good at that craft or knowledgeable about that subject or whatever. Even in the time of the Buddha, they'd use the simile of the potter learning to make clay pots. At first they're not very good at it. If you've ever done pottery, using clay to make pots, and you're putting them on a wheel, at first you're not very good at it, so you put your lump of clay on the wheel and it just flies off, or it collapses under your fingers, you get it all wrong. It takes a while before you get good at making pots or cups or plates, whatever you're making. It's a skill that you may have to learn for many years. In Buddhism, it's much the same. At first you're going to be full of doubts, uncertainty about different aspects of the practice or what you've heard. So teachers help to allay some of those doubts. Visiting teachers, studying, practicing with teachers, staying close to teachers, that can help. Also bringing up the quality of respect for the Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha. Because if you respect something, then it means you give it value. So even if you're new to the practice, if if you have a sense that the Buddha and his teachings was coming from a place of wisdom and compassion, then you can, it will help you to bring up this sense of respect and valuing the Buddha and his teachings, valuing the Dhamma, the truth, and the teachings that point to the truth, valuing and respecting the Sangha, those who have practiced and realized the truth, or the Four Noble Truths. The more you practice, the more you will tend to respect Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, and it's perhaps one of the more subtle aspects of Buddhist practice, learning to respect Dhamma. What does that mean? We usually say Dhamma is the truth. There's aspects of the truth, as the Buddha explained, say the teaching of karma and teaching of causality, that things arise due to causes and conditions, that our actions contribute to results. Intentional action, karma, will bring results, good and bad, depending on the quality of the intention. Teachings, central teachings to Buddhism like this are teachings that you come to respect over time and give value to as something important. So you used to ask, well, who does the Buddha respect? If a Buddha is enlightened, completely self-enlightened Buddha, who does the Buddha respect? Well, the Buddha still respects the Dhamma, the truth, because it's something that is valuable, worthy of respect. The Buddha himself once talked about how in a previous life he'd been a king. If I remember correctly, he'd been a king who practiced the Dhamma, and he was travelling on the border of his kingdom on a road, and he had all his retinue with him. He had all his soldiers and his servants and his administrators, and they had ox carts of stuff, all the supplies with the king. So there's a whole entourage of people and carts and things going one way along this road, and they met the king from the neighbouring kingdom. This was a sort of shared road that bordered both kingdoms. And the other king that they met, coming from the opposite direction, had an equal number of soldiers and ox carts and servants and people. So these two kings met, and they were both kind of equally matched in terms of wealth and power and soldiers and armies. And a bit like a kind of cartoon or something, there was this standoff, who should move to the side and let the other go through. If they're equal in terms of army and wealth and power and prestige, well, it wouldn't be good for one to give way to the other. And the last thing that they discussed was the Dhamma. And one king said, well, I keep the 5 precepts. The other king said, well, I keep the 8 precepts. Because they both had faith and respect for the Dhamma, they agreed that the king who only kept the 5 precepts should step aside for the king who kept the 8 precepts, because his Dhamma was higher, meaning his commitment to the training was a little bit firmer and higher because he was keeping more precepts. So even the Buddha acknowledges, respects, values the Dhamma. So we certainly should respect the Dhamma. We respect the Sangha, those who have practiced well, practiced sincerely, and developed insight. And you can respect the insight of other people. especially when they share them with us in Dhamma teachings. Because sometimes that's the way we gain insight, we gain experience, when we listen with respect to the Dhamma, especially from somebody who has practiced more than us. Maybe they share their insights that will support us gaining some wisdom and understanding in that moment. Buddhist monks actually have a rule: we're not supposed to teach somebody who's showing disrespect for the Dhamma, because it's kind of a waste of time and it's not respecting the Dhamma as such. We're not promoting the Dhamma if the people around us are not respectful of it. It's not the right time to teach. We actually have a rule saying don't teach when people are disrespectful. The only way you can really gain some penetrating insight into the Dhamma or realize the Dhamma is when you respect it, when you value it. So whether it's respecting the practitioner, the teacher, or the Kalyana Mitta, or respecting the Dhamma itself, or respecting the Buddha. Respect implies you give value to something. Then you'll want to practice, you'll want to learn about it, find out about it, give it importance in your mind. And this is what will help you overcome doubts. So in terms of respecting Sangha, if you meet with Sangha who you feel have had insight and understanding in the Dhamma, then it gives you confidence and the belief that it can be done. People can train themselves, say, on the level of precepts. People can keep precepts, whether it's 5, 8, or the Vinaya of monks and nuns. People can develop mindfulness, develop states of calm and samadhi. People can develop insight and uproot greed, anger and delusion from their mind, if either partially or completely. In meeting Sangha and giving respect to Sangha gives you that confidence that, it can be done. People can let go of mental defilements. They can find inner peace, inner happiness. Once you meet other people who can do that and they share their insight, their understanding with you, which may give you confidence, then you turn it back in on yourself and you say, well, I can do this too, because they're a human being just like me. And that's also part of the practice, learning to respect yourself, because you have to see, value yourself. You might say love yourself to practice the Dhamma, because you've got to see that it's a worthwhile thing to do, to train yourself. When we still have doubt about Dhamma, then we tend to, that doubt also feeds a bit of fear or uncertainty about, can I do it? And also, what difficulties will I have to encounter to practice the Dhamma? So we have some fear, some uncertainty. We're worried it may be difficult for us to do it. So if you meet other practitioners who have practiced and you realize they're much the same as you, then you can come back to yourself and say, well, I can do this. And if you really wish yourself well, you yourself want to experience the peace, the understanding that these other people have. That helps you, to give you some courage and helps you to overcome the doubts and the fears. So the practice of Dhamma is synonymous, at least on one level, with the practice of metta, goodwill for yourself. So in the end, we have to practice with ourselves. You can't make someone else practice. You can encourage them and share what you know with them, but in the end, each person has to practice and realize the Dhamma for themselves. So that means each practitioner has to find some respect for themselves if they're really going to pursue this path. You've got to see it as something worthwhile. That's different from saying, when you get too conceited or arrogant in life, sometimes then we say, well, I deserve more, I deserve this, I deserve that. It's not that we deserve insight or we deserve peace of mind from the Dhamma practice, but with the sense of self-respect and love of oneself as one human being. These are very positive qualities that we're directing to ourselves so that we can encourage ourselves to practice, to learn, to improve. In the end, the practice is like everything else, based on cause and effect. So if you're only going to experience results from the practice if you put in the right causes. You can only experience the cessation of suffering if you cultivate the path that leads to the cessation of suffering, what we call the Eightfold Noble Path. You might feel you deserve not to suffer, and you can wish that, but it's not something you can just experience through wishing or feeling you deserve it. You actually have to cultivate the causes for that, and you have to do the practice. The one who you might say does deserve to experience no suffering is the one who has put effort into the practice. It's not just something you can wish for and hope for alone, or you can't just ask for it either. You can ask for it from a God or some higher being. It's something we have to develop through our own effort, through our own practice. So practicing Dhamma is one of the most mature things, or the most mature thing a human being can do. And even though other people help us, and sometimes hinder us as well, in the end it comes back down to us. You have to have this, cultivate this faith, confidence in yourself and your own ability to practice so that you can get up the right amount of energy and effort to deal with all the obstacles that you'll encounter. And sometimes you hear people who've meditated for a while and they say, oh, I experienced this peace and calm that came when I was meditating, which is a good thing. But then they have another doubt, you might say a more refined doubt, not the doubt that stops them practicing in the beginning, but it's a doubt that comes up later, after they've been practicing for a while. They say, I experienced this very peaceful state of mind, but then the doubt came up, I felt, I don't really deserve this, I'm not good enough. It's almost like the self-respect wasn't maintained at that point, so then the mind goes back to a little bit of negativity, self-criticism, self-aversion. And that's very common in modern society. We somehow, our conditioning is that we often feel inadequate or undeserving, even when we have put effort in and done something. We still can't sit back and enjoy it. We feel like there's something wrong. And so sometimes people do this in meditation and they achieve some peace, but they say, oh, this isn't really me, or I don't deserve this. And they set it aside and maybe even withdraw from their meditation, finish it, do something else. It happens. It's very sad. So self-respect is a tricky one, not to have so much self-respect that it turns in, or not to attach to it so much that it turns into a form of arrogance or conceit, but then not to undermine it either, so that you turn away from the genuine good results of your practice either. Ajahn Chah used to say, everything is teaching us. So in that respect, everything is Dhamma, everything is the truth. So if you're respecting the Dhamma, then you're looking to learn from every experience you have, even the bad ones. So he encouraged people to develop this attitude of contemplating, reflecting on their experience. So even if you experience peace and some real states of deep states of calm that come from samadhi, say, to reflect on that, and if you have the thought, oh, I don't deserve this, well, don't just follow that thought, but reflect, well, where's that coming from? Maybe it's something that you've been fostering, holding on to through your life in different aspects of your life. In things you've done since you were young, or in your work or your relationships, whatever. It may be one pattern of thinking that you experience. So even when you put effort into meditating and you calm down, that kind of doubt or uncertainty can come into your mind. So to keep reflecting on that. Everything is teaching us. So it's quite all right sometimes to make mistakes or have doubts. Things go wrong, or we see that we're attaching to something, a wrong view, or a way that ultimately we realize is causing us some suffering. It's all right to realize that as you practice, but you have to have the attitude of learning from it so you can go beyond it. And everything can become an attachment. From day one practicing Buddhism, we've all noticed different attachments that we've had to work with. The aim is to learn from them. Ajahn Chah himself, he said when he first left the monastery, like he spent a few years in his monastery, and then he went out walking wandering in the forest looking for a meditation teacher. He went with one or two other monks, and at first they were worried about how comfortable they would be walking from village to village, place to place without knowing anyone. They weren't sure what support they would get. They weren't sure how much food they would get, or whether they would be able to eat the food they were offered from different places. So one of the things they took with them, they carried a mortar and pestle, which in those days was made from stone, so they're very heavy. And he put it in his backpack. Monks have a backpack, it's like a bowl. They have their alms bowl in a bag on their back, and all their robes and personal items are put together into that bag and carried on the back like a backpack. So he had a mortar and pestle there, and he walked a few kilometers and realized, oh, this is really heavy, weighing me down. And so that was given away. He said it was the first thing he gave away on his trip, his first kind of road trip wandering through the forests of Thailand. Gave it away to some villager. And later he laughed about it. He said, oh, so attached to food, wanted to make sure we got the chili paste that we like to add to our food, so we had the mortar and pestle, and that was the first thing to go. And that's exactly what you're learning in meditation, is where you're attaching and holding on, whether it's you'll be some kind of self-view, it can be a physical thing, like a mortar and pestle, but it can also be your self-view, how you view yourself as deserving, as not, as good, as bad, as right and wrong. All the opinions and views that we accumulate over time, as you start meditating, you'll notice how much you're carrying things around with you. And sometimes you have to be willing to learn from that and say, oh, this is something maybe I have to set down. Can even be the thought, I don't deserve peace. I'm not a good person, I don't deserve any success, any happiness that I get. Even that can become a kind of a view, can't it? A negative self-view. You have to recognize that, realize what you're doing, attaching to that. Maybe it's a habit of negative thinking that you just keep building up over time. Sometimes we remember our faults. As you meditate, you tend to remember things. And on the one hand, you're aspiring to peace of mind, purity of mind, letting go. On the other hand, you remember something you said or done. And it's like that becomes the most important thing. So you lose your self-respect, you lose this good attitude that you've been cultivating, and you just pick up on your faults and then just carry your faults around with you for a while in your mind. Even though you're meditating, doing something very good, you pick up on the fault that you've noticed, and that becomes the most important thing in your mind. So you carry it around like a heavy weight. Sometimes that's fueled by idealism, so you maybe have the view, I shouldn't have any anger or any jealousy or any worry in my mind. So as soon as you see any of that, then you build it up into something very big. I'm not a good meditator, I shouldn't. I'm unable to meditate because I've got this worry or this attachment that I've noticed. And then it becomes a kind of block. We have to be willing to look at these things and see the heaviness of them. Another aspect of the Dhamma is it lightens up the mind, brightens the mind, but it also lightens the mind, lightens the load of the mind. So to see the Dhamma in something, even like a cherished self-view, that I am a person like this, I'm good, I'm bad, I'm this way, I'm that way, to recognize that as you're meditating, say, oh, this is something that conditions my mind, stops the mind settling down or brings a lot of suffering along with it. As we meditate, we often, you build up a view of yourself. Maybe you view yourself as the meditator. I am the meditator in my group of friends or in my family. I'm the only one interested in meditation. Nobody else is. And then somebody comes along and says something that tests that view. Maybe they say, oh, you say you're the meditator, but you seem to always be falling asleep, or you don't do very much meditation, or you're like this, or you're like that. Sometimes when we attach too much to our self-view, say about meditation, we might have the view, I'm a meditator, so I'm more self-controlled, and then that slips out in the way we speak to other people. So then people start to watch you, don't they? And they notice if you get a bit irritated or angry, they'll say, oh, your meditation's no good, look, you're getting angry. It's almost like you set out a challenge to them because of your self-view and your identification with this view that you're now the meditator in the place, in the group or whatever. So then people start looking at you, waiting for you to make a mistake. So if you're a meditator, making a mistake means like you display a mood, you lose your equanimity, lose your detachment, you lose your self-control. Some people, they're so mischievous they enjoy it, even though you're suffering and you're getting caught into your attachments. If that's what's happening, they're almost like little Mara figures. These mischievous people who say, see, she's getting angry, or he's getting lost in his worry or his agitation, and they actually enjoy it. Some people have this idealistic view of themselves, some people project it onto others. So some people have an idealistic view of monks, and they say, oh, monks should be totally serene, perfectly mindful, perfectly peaceful. So if a monk displays a little bit of a mood, straight away they jump on them, criticize them, laugh at them. Sometimes if you display a mood as a monk, you display a little bit of irritation because you do lose your mindfulness, and then you display the irritation. Someone points the finger and say, "Oh, you're not a real monk. You're getting angry." Double suffering. You got the suffering of your own mood, and then the suffering coming from somebody else, finding fault with you, criticizing you. But it's all food for thought, isn't it? It's all teaching. It's all Dhamma to be learnt from. And that's the amazing thing about the human mind, is we can learn when we train it, when we bring up the mindfulness and investigate, reflect on things, we can learn from our experience. So something that helps us to practice is just the belief that it's possible to let go of mental defilements, attachment to views and opinions, let go of stress, suffering. You have to have a certain belief that it's possible, even if you haven't done it yet, because then you'll feel energized to practice. It's worth practicing. You have to believe you can do it, not just other people in the storybooks or amazing enlightened teachers you've heard about or even met perhaps. But you also have to reflect back on yourself and say, if they can do it, I can do it. For many people, that's a turning point in their practice, when they have that kind of realization, well, I can let go of some things because they've seen it for themselves. They've let go of something that they were formerly holding on to. They've seen a worry drop away, or some anger drop away, or some greed dissolve as they've kept practicing. And they realize that, oh, I'm more content than before. This feeling of contentment, well-being comes up, and then it's tangible enough that they know it. They can sense it, and they say, "Oh, I'm not so stressed about something as I used to be." It's those kind of moments when you realize, oh, you can practice, and you have to build on those moments, even if they're only very small moments when you manage to let go of something that formerly you hadn't let go of. Sometimes it's sleepiness, like many monks I know, they're sitting up late at night meditating, they've been plagued by sleepiness maybe for many months or years, and then finally they have a breakthrough and then they get through their sleepiness. And they realize, oh, sleepiness can be let go of, and they're suddenly in a brighter, happier place. Or when things that used to annoy you about life, about yourself, about other people, you finally realize you're not getting annoyed anymore. It can be sometimes a wave of rapture or contentment comes up. You realize it doesn't matter. Whatever way it works, it comes through cultivating more inner awareness, mindfulness, and then reflecting on the Dhamma, believing that these things can be let go of, putting it into practice and then doing it. In one aspect of the Dhamma, we say it's pachatang veditabo vinyuhi, to be realized individually by the wise. It's something you have to realize for yourself through the practice. Even though others spur you on and support you, you have to do it for yourself. It's also why the cultivation of patience is so important in Dhamma practice, because it takes time to bring your mind to a point where you can see that you can let go of things. You have to be patient enough to keep doing it until you get to that point. We don't know how long it will take, to establish mindfulness, to recognize where we're holding on to something, a wrong view, a way of looking at things that's causing us suffering. It may take months or even years before you realize where you've been going wrong in your thinking. So you need the patience to keep looking, to keep learning from your experience. Where does patience come from? It also comes from goodwill, doesn't it? Metta for yourself as a human being, having that interest to cultivate the qualities, the skillful qualities of a human being, a good human being. You have to set aside the self-doubt or the thought, I don't deserve this. In the end, we're all human beings, so we all deserve whatever goodness can come from being a human being. But we have to cultivate it. Some people, they're very good at helping others and then they neglect themselves. Some people are only interested in themselves and neglect others. The Buddha encouraged us to do both together. You help others and help yourself, help others. So maybe I'll leave you with these few reflections tonight, and if anyone has any questions afterwards, I'll be happy to answer them.